No, the call to turn the other cheek, see Matthew 5, verse 39, was not a command to become pacifists. If someone smites you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also, giving your cloak if a man sues you for your coat, and going an extra mile with one who commands you to go 1 mile with him. In order to clear up possible misunderstandings about the three concepts I just mentioned from Matthew 5, verses 38 to 42, I'd like to read to you an excerpt from a tract called Should Christians Love the Wicked? By Pastor Sheldon Emery. But first, for those who are not familiar with these three concepts, I'd like to read Matthew 5, verses 38 to 42 from the King James Version. Ye have heard that it hath been said, An eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you, that ye resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if any man will sue thee at the law, and take away thy coat, let him have thy cloak also. And whosoever shall compel thee to go a mile, go with him twain. Give to him that asketh thee, and from him that would borrow of thee, turn not thou away. And to give you also a slightly different point of view to the KJV, I'd like to quote the same verses also from the Young's Literal Translation, 3rd Revision from 1898. Ye heard that it was said, Eye for eye and tooth for tooth. But I say to you, not to resist the evil, but whoever shall slap thee on thy right cheek, turn to him also the other. And whoever is willing to take thee to law, and thy coat to take, suffer to him also the cloak. And whoever shall impress thee 1 mile, go with him 2. To him who is asking of thee, be giving, and him who is willing to borrow from thee, thou mayest not turn away. So now let's go to the excerpt I would like to share with you from the tract by Sheldon Emery. Conclusion. We have seen that God's law requires that we put to death those who kill our neighbor and our neighbor's children, else we deny our neighbor our love. Therefore the murderers could hardly be our scriptural neighbors, could they? Who is our neighbor according to the Bible? The story of the Good Samaritan was told by Jesus Christ specifically to answer that very question. The lawyer asked Jesus in Luke 10, verse 29, Who is my neighbor? Here is Jesus' answer. And Jesus answering said, A certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and fell among thieves, which stripped him of his raiment, and wounded him, and departed, leaving him half dead. And by chance there came down a certain priest that way, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. And likewise a Levite, when he was at the place, came and looked on him, and passed by on the other side. But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion on him, and went to him, and bound up his wounds, pouring in oil and wine, and set him on his own beast, and brought him to an inn, and took care of him. And on the morrow, when he departed, he took out 2 pence, and gave them to the host, and said unto him, Take care of him, and whatsoever thou spendest more, when I come again, I will repay thee. Luke 10, verses 30 to 35. That is the end of the story Jesus was telling. Then Jesus asks, Which now of these 3 thinkest thou was neighbor unto him that fell among the thieves? And he said, He that showed mercy on him. Then said Jesus unto him, Go and do thou likewise. Luke chapter 10, verses 36 to 37. Jesus approved his answer. But if everyone is our neighbor, wouldn't all men in the story be neighbor to the injured man? Yes. But you see, everyone is not our neighbor. Jesus didn't even include the thieves in his question, yet they were probably local inhabitants. They were given no consideration at all as being neighbors. Look who the others were who were excluded from the definition: a priest and a Levite. Certainly their position in the community would make them scriptural neighbors. No, only the one who gave aid to the injured man, the one who obeyed God's law, was a neighbor. You have probably heard parents or older people use the term neighbor in this true sense. They will say of a good person, "He certainly is very neighborly," or "He is a good neighbor." They will complain of a nearby unfriendly resident that "he is not very neighborly." They didn't mean he lived far away. They meant he was not Christian-like in his acts and attitudes. They denied him as a neighbor. They were using the term correctly according to Jesus. That the word neighbor, as used by Jesus for the Samaritan, referred only to his character and acts, not his residence, is obvious from the story. It says the Samaritan was on a journey and he was so far from home he had to take the injured man to the local inn, to have him cared for, and then had to leave him with the host. Obviously, the Samaritan did not live nearby, but he was the only one called neighbor. The word neighbor, like the word brother, is named only on those of good character, those of Christian action, and those with a godly relationship to those in need. We cannot call murderers, thieves, and disobedient priests and Levites our neighbor. Since Christians are commanded only to love their neighbors, then neither Jesus nor the disciples ever commanded Christians to love the wicked and the ungodly. Someone is sure to ask, "But Pastor Emery, what about Matthew 5? Turning the other cheek, giving your cloak if a man sues you for your coat, and going an extra mile with one who commands you to go 1 mile with him." Smiting a man on the cheek is not a deadly assault with intent to maim or murder. It was instead a common way of one man claiming his honor against another who had insulted or injured him. The one being struck was the one who had committed the original offense. Jesus was telling his followers, "If you have done a man wrong, and he accuses you by smiting you on the cheek, do not respond with an invitation for a duel, as the heathen do, but turn away and acknowledge your offense. If you were sued at law and lost your coat, obviously you would have been the one at fault." Jesus is telling his followers, if you have been found to lawfully owe another something, pay him more than you owe, pay more than the law demands. Has anyone compelled you to go a mile? It could have happened then, since it was Roman law that any Roman soldier could compel a citizen to carry his baggage up to a maximum of 1 mile. Again, what is the instruction here? Simply this: Christian, you do more than you are asked to do. You go that extra mile. Jesus was telling his followers, you do more good than the unbeliever. None of these are instances of mortal danger, robbery, or of physical persecution. Jesus is not commanding us to accept any and all attacks on our person or family without resistance. That is not the object of Matthew 5 at all. The tragedy is that so many false teachers among us try to use such passages to make pacifists and doormats of Christians. By them, they prevent Christians from stopping the Antichrist and the murderers among us. They trick us into believing that Jesus has told us not only that we must love the wicked, but that we must not resist his wicked ways. Jesus has done no such thing. Jesus has not commanded Christians to love the wicked. Certainly, when Christians were told in 2 Corinthians 6 to be not unequally yoked together with unbelievers, to have no fellowship with the unrighteous, and to come out from among them and be separate and touch not the unclean thing, we should have known better than to accept the false philosophy that Jesus himself commanded us to love and forgive, protect and defend the wicked. No, Christ commands Christians to love, forgive, protect and defend their brethren, their brothers, their neighbors, and their fellow Christians. Our forefathers obeyed Christ in this. May God help us to do the same. Pastor Sheldon Emery. Now, in addition to the excerpt I just read to you, I'd like to read to you a quote concerning loving our enemies from Thomas Paine. He that would make his own liberty secure must guard even his enemy from oppression, for if he violates this duty, he establishes a precedent that will reach to himself.